Hey there, I'm Jordan, host of PeopleFirst, the Young Careers podcast. Thank you for joining me once again. On today's episode, I'm touching on a topic that can be quite sensitive, and that's navigating a career gap. Sometimes having a career gap is down to having a child or going traveling, but sometimes it can be for something a bit more sensitive. For example, a spell in hospital or a prison sentence, or a difficult and traumatic life event. Whether you've had long periods of illness or you've been in the prison system, getting back into work and moving forward can be difficult. But there are always ways to pick yourself back up. To chat all this through, I'm joined by the wonderful Chance Blue Montgomery, who has his own story of career gaps. Chance is Partnership Support Manager at Bridge of Hope Careers, and he's also the founder of the Truth Community Group. I'm also joined by James Fellows, who's founder of Bridge of Hope. And just a heads up, during this discussion there may be some difficult themes such as abuse or suicide. But for now, Chance and James, welcome to the podcast. So James, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast, Jordan. I'm really very excited about this. When it comes to a personal journey, I came from a position of extreme privilege, is the honest answer. So I started, born in Cambridge, and I had an incredibly happy and idyllic childhood, brought up near Cambridge, a very, very happy family. And age 13, I was sent away to the world's most famous boarding school. That one. So famous that my classmate was a boy called Cameron, who went on to run the country. You get the gist of the fortune and privilege I had. And then I spent nearly 3 decades in the drinks business. So I worked for Guinness and Diageo, one of the biggest drinks companies in the world. Absolutely loved it, had a great time, got posted to America 2002 with my young family. And by 2008, everything was golden. I was managing many of the biggest customers in America for Diageo, 3 kids, big swimming pool, big mansion. What could possibly go wrong? So you probably gathered by the fact that I ultimately set up a social enterprise, maybe quite a lot. And to be honest, that was a bit of an understatement. Having been probably one of the luckiest people in the entire universe for 40 odd years, my luck deserted me. And anything that could go wrong did go wrong, mainly about redundancies. So I got made redundant 5 times in 6 years. But I also got sued, my business taken away, I got swindled, all my savings taken away, and it all started to unravel fairly spectacularly. Ultimately, I was sent to a psychiatric ward just outside New York. I spent 2 interesting weeks in an asylum just outside New York, trying to sort of come to terms with what was happening as my life was unraveling spectacularly. So ultimately it was decided that I'd go back to England, come back to England to recover. And in the next 3 or 4 weeks, my entire Maslow's pyramid, if you can imagine it, really just disintegrated. It started with being told I definitely had bipolar disorder, or I prefer to call it bipolar reorder. I didn't even know what it was, frankly. Then I was in full denial, and now I embrace it as my superpower. All a bit rubbish, but I had to try and feed my kids, and somehow to find some money. Now my doctor said, look, you're not allowed to do anything that involves, sitting behind a desk doing any kind of exec job. So I thought, okay, no problem. I'll go and get a job in a pub. But nobody would give me a job. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll try coffee shops. They just laughed at me. They looked at my CV and just burst out laughing. And nobody would give me a job. And having been white, male, and very privileged, I'd never experienced barriers to employment. But I did manage to kind of get out of there, got slowly back into the corporate world, got a bit of a break, got back into the drinks industry, and started climbing back up the greasy pole a little bit until 6 years ago, when I was laid off one more time. So that effectively was the backdrop to the Bridge of Hope.
And that's every time I hear this story, James, it still gets interesting, and I pick up on a different segment of it every single time. And I think taking that from your story and the jobs that you've had, what was your very, very, very first job?
I did a ton of jobs as a kid. From the age of 14, we were basically given a day to lie in bed, and then it was like go off and get something to work, which was really great. I really appreciate my parents doing that, and I did exactly the same with my kids. So I did any manual labor you could do, from picking stones to making sausages to you name it. And then I did some entrepreneurial stuff as well, which was all quite interesting, selling equine jacuzzis, believe it or not, and various other crazy stuff.
That's unique, I have to say. Very unique.
It was very unique. There's a whole story behind that, which we haven't got time for.
Yeah, well, I'm from Belfast, James, so that sounds pretty similar to some of my first jobs back in the day. So, Chance, before we get into your story, could you tell us about Bridge of Hope Careers and what your role is within the group?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Chance Boone Montgomery. I'm the Partner Support Manager for Bridge of Hope Careers. And we're not just a jobs board like you see them. We're an absolute partner and really passionate about social mobility, boosting social value, and really bringing opportunities to people who are system impacted in the UK.
That's great. And again, we always like to ask our guests what their first job was. So if we go right back to the start, Chance, what was your first job?
It was a really crap one, to be quite honest with you. And I remember it wasn't me that went to the interview either. It was, it was my uncle basically coming back to me and saying, okay, I've got your job. You start on Monday. I didn't have a choice. I think it was my mum that told him to try and do it for me. And it was as a van assistant.
Okay.
So I was known as a van boy, which meant driving around, basically lifting boxes and barrels and all this stuff into fancy restaurants. And I lasted about 3 weeks there, and left because I was called the N-word.
Okay.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'm so sorry to hear that. But thinking back then, so that those 3 weeks, how did you make that journey? After being made to leave, or after you chose to leave, from those 3 weeks, how have you got to the position that you're in today, Chance?
Oh, where I am on this journey doesn't start there. It starts way before that. You know, and it was, you know, I was born, unfortunately, into a family where my dad didn't think I was his. And so from the outset, I started to experience huge amounts of physical abuse, the first being before I was 1 year old. And that left me with what I thought were birthmarks until I was 21. And mum told me what really happened on my 21st birthday, would you believe it? Because she thought that I was a man and could handle what I was about to hear, which I couldn't, you know. And I tried to sort of make changes in my life, and not so much great success, you know, being found jobs and things like that I didn't want, was a part of that journey, and trying to be forced down different directions. Anyway, you know, my sister, who was my absolute rock on this journey, you know, always supported me, always there for me, knew what was happening to me whilst no one else was talking about it. She then died of cancer, young. And I didn't want to talk about it, as if it couldn't get any worse for me, you know. And I felt like if I talked about it, it would make it real, which is the worst thing to do. I advise everyone, if they're going through bereavement, to just talk. It's so important. I didn't. And within a year, my life completely spiraled out of control. It completely unraveled. And I ended up inside, you know, inside again after going to prison when I was 16 for hanging out with the wrong crowd, for running away from home, you know. And then it was my sister that actually took me to a mental hospital when I was 18. And that was because the childhood depression and trauma seriously broke me down at this point, you know. So my sister dies. I don't want to talk about it. Everything spirals out of control. I end up back inside one last time. But this time I asked myself this question: do you like who you are? And the answer was a solid no. In fact, I thought if this was going to be my existence for my future, I didn't see the point in having one. I really didn't. And I'll never forget the day. I just wanted to end it all. And so I was left with the choices to literally either jump off a cliff or change. And so I threw everything in the kitchen sink and the neighbour's kitchen sink at change, and spent 3 years and 10 months in therapy to unlock some pain and to deal with those childhood traumas, while spending 5 years studying with the Open University to give myself an education my childhood didn't afford unto me, and done swaves of personal development programs. And then this incredible day came upon me where I was just filled with ebullience, and the warm tears of joy came flooding down my face. And it was because for the first time in my entire life, I felt freedom. No more emotional discombobulation, no more anger. I was filled with forgiveness and topped to the brim with self-respect. And I realized two things had happened to me on that day. One, my childhood experiences were no longer going to define my future. And two, I'd finally become the person I was always meant to be. And that was the day I decided whatever work I'm doing, it must be about nourishing lives, making a difference, changing the worlds of the people around me. And so I went on to do just that. And I was introduced to James here, and through some of the charities we work with. We work with 105 of them now. And James and I became friends for about a year and a half. We are still friends, you should all know. And
I would like to hope so after this point.
And he kept saying, he said, come over to Bridge of Hope, come and have a look and see what we're doing. And I didn't at first, because I was setting up these community groups. But my God, when I went and had a look, for me, it was like an invitation to heaven. And I'll tell you why. I was successfully transforming the lives of young men who'd come into contact with the criminal justice system. But I looked at Bridge of Hope and I said, my God, I can support everyone. Veterans, people with neurodivergence like myself, students, women returners, black and minority ethnics, LGBT. I thought, this is where I want to live. This is the place for me. And so all roads led to us looking at this space and wanted it to be more than remarkable, because what I saw was something I saw for the first time. And it was a pathway, a bridge where candidates who are system impacted, marginalized in any way, can walk towards employers who are looking for them. And this is why I love the work we do. I love Bridge of Hope and what it stands for. And we do everything in our power to create supportive pathways and tools that even candidates can turn around and support their family members with, such as free financial advice, etc. So I hope that answers your question. I think I've exuded certain amounts of passion here. You can see it on me. Yeah.
Plenty amounts of passion, Chance. And I guess for listeners, Chance and James are our media partners with Brook Street in Bridge of Hope, and one of our valued media partners. So throughout this discussion, please talk to me as if I'm completely unaware, boys, because our listeners will be. So if we go back, you obviously, your story is one of a kind, Chance, but throughout that time, and I think I already know the answer to this, did you feel supported by the system? And I use that in inverted commas, but you positioned yourself as a means of support now. How did you feel that you were supported, if at all?
Back then, by the system, I wasn't supported by the system at all. The system was set up to keep people like me away or out. And so every single thing I tried that was positive had some sort of barrier, some sort of no entry. But what happened is that I was always motivated to try and do things. And that motivation, because of those barriers, that motivation has morphed itself into a determination. And so I get to where I get to by sheer determination, because there's one thing that I don't complain about being marginalized. I don't complain too much about facing those barriers, because they've given me something very, very valuable. They've given me resilience. My resilience level is off the Richter scale, and I realized that might be the same for so many people who face barriers. People who are disabled, they're navigating their way around. They've become resilient. People who's neurodiverse, having to navigate systems, they've become resilient. And that's what we have. When you're system impacted, and face these barriers, you build up this level of resilience. And I must tell you all that resilience and grit are the number one predictors for success. And so all that hardship, it has left me and others in good stead to be taken on by great organizations like I have been. And it's well worth investing in people who have those predictors of success, because we will go far given the opportunity. And that's what's happened here today. So I see myself as very fortunate. I see anyone who registers on Bridge of Hope as very fortunate as well, because the systems that were out there, they were indeed, I won't say the word, but they've left me with resilience and grit, for which I'm very, very proud to have. And my mantra now is failure cannot cope with persistence.
And I absolutely love that mantra. Absolutely love it. And not that I can relate to you, Chance, but I can in the way that I grew up gay in Northern Ireland. So I didn't think that gay people actually had jobs, And I think that chip in my shoulder has made me always constantly want more. And people talk about it as if it should be a negative. But what you've just said is actually quite validating for me, because you keep that and it stays with you and it makes you want more all the time, and keep wanting it. And if I think back to something that you mentioned before when you introduced yourself, going back to spending some times in hospital and in prison, things like that can often lead to people just sort of stopping and feeling sorry for themselves and not moving on. When you meet someone in a similar position to what you were, what do you say to them? How does that make you feel?
Let me salute you. Being gay and in Northern Ireland, you're going to face so much crap. But you're here today with your smile on, and there's so many intersectionalities about us, that we get to bring to the table. So I thank everyone who's put people like us under pressure, because we have now become diamonds in the rough, and it is pressure that has made a diamond so special as we know it. And it's pressure that has made our system impacted candidates so resilient and so special. So I salute you. We're in the same classroom, my friend. But I always say to people, use those experiences to your advantage. Just as an example, when I speak to candidates, and I mentor quite a lot of young men, when I speak to candidates who's come into contact with the criminal justice system, and they say, what do I do about the fact that they're going to say I'm an ex-offender and I've gone through this and blah, 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 child experience. And I say to them, use your experiences to demonstrate your abilities. I said, and I say to them things like, did you hold down a job? You have to hold down a job inside prison. And many people are holding down 2 or 3 jobs. And I said, well, if they ask you the question, what are you like working under pressure? Well, I held down 2 jobs in a prison. You tick that box in it tenfold. Talk about how you were able to navigate through your adversities to come out the other side, how you're able to use your innovation, your creative mind to navigate around these situations. And you can talk about this in an interview, you can talk about this in a cover letter, and then it turns what was once an adverse situation into examples of how you can cope in a variety of different situations and be successful.
Yeah, and I completely agree. It's almost like it's transferable skills, isn't it? And resilience is the one thing that I know recruiters look for whenever we're looking at, things for difficult clients, for example, or maybe they're navigating an industry which is a bit taboo or something like that. It's resilience is such an important factor that we look for aside from the qualifications for the job. And going back to if someone was an offender, what sort of typical obstacles would someone coming out of prison that wants to get into their first job since being inside, what sort of obstacles stand in their way if we're thinking typically?
there are some things that they will have to immediately get sorted out, and that's things like your bank accounts, and your ID and that type of thing. But one of the things that may well stand in their way is a lack of funds. They walk out of that prison gate, they're given, I think it's £47-48 and told to be on your way. You should be all right now that if you've got some money in your pocket. Well, if they walk past a Nando's, that's the end of that £47, and and then they're stuck, But they must know that there are organisations out there who can help with getting them suits and clothes to wear to interviews. Timpson's has just opened that they're going to dry clean anyone's clothes for free if they're disadvantaged and going for an interview. But what we offer is we can help them to access wages before payday. If they do get into that job, we can continue that support through signposting. We can help them with financial advice that can come for free. We can signpost for things like that as well. So we are constantly building upon these things. But one of the things that really, really will stand as a barrier for many people walking out those prison gates is, what job am I going to do? Who's going to accept me? What are the different industries that I might thrive in? And we thought about this, and then we partnered with an organization who helps with that, and we have that on our support center. So if you're ambivalent, unsure of what you want to do, you can go onto our site, tap into this system, and info, send me an info if you need any support with this type of thing. But it's gamified, and you tap in your personality traits, not your skills, not your qualities, your personality traits, and it gives you back a list of industry your personality is transferable to. That really opens up the mind for not just returning citizens from prison, but any candidate, who's wondering, what do I do next?
Something I would love to talk about with you both is, we often hear about, and you put it beautifully, is the idea of barriers to employment. So I would love to know if maybe you could give me a bit of an insight into what that actually means in real terms.
Yeah, I could start with this. I mean, there are some barriers that just happen simply because you've not got the right looking name. You've got applicant tracking systems that are set up to discard anyone with various names that are not English sounding, postcodes, and a variety of different things. And then there's also the biases that you face from unconscious biases. People believing that because you're a certain way, we're not going to let you in. Your unconscious bias has kicked in and told you not to. As an example, it is an unconscious bias that if you've been to prison, then surely you're going to be a thief for the rest of your life. Yeah, you must
be untrustworthy. That's what we just spoke about. That's it.
Right. This isn't true. We ran Project Venture. We were a charity before this. We ran Project Venture for 4 years. It was helping people who come out of prison into setting up their own businesses. In the 4 years that ran, not one person returned back to prison. Their lives were changed. They met a new network and they grew that and embraced it, And so we know that this is not the case. It's an unconscious bias that is making us feel this way. These are barriers. People with disabilities face barriers because employers feel as though, we can't make these reasonable adjustments. It will cost a lot of money and this type of thing. When in fact, they could get access to work support. There's so many different levels of support that's available to employers to help candidates to who are disabled to work, whether that disability be neurodiversity or physical, or mental in any way. So there are so many barriers that people are facing, and as we stand at the moment, hiring managers are basically using the same system they've been used to, but trying to tap into a talent pool they're not used to, and so what they're currently doing They're going into that jewelry shop, if you like, and they're buying that ready cut diamond, all sparkly and nice, and the jeweler's got a lovely smile on their face. But guess what? Some of those diamonds are not real. There's zirconias and cubic stones.
Moissanite, that's
right?
all, yeah.
Yeah, because mum wrote the CV or ChatGTP wrote that CV. You know, what we're talking about here are the diamonds in the rough.
Yeah.
You know, those diamonds, they only need a little polish and they'll sparkle like any other diamond. You know, but like I always say, it's pressure that makes the diamond resilient. It's pressure that has made our system impacted candidates so special and resilient as they are also.
Building on what Chance has just said, we're trying to flip the narrative on its head, to be honest. And from a candidate point of view, we're trying to say, look, come on into the Bridge of Hope careers. And this is the first place where all that is normally a crap, that is normally bad news, is good news. It's kind of like an inverse universe. So if you have autism, believe it or not, we've got 5 different employers actively looking for people with autism, because they know they're phenomenal at pinpoint accuracy, really good at compliance, operations, etc., and only 14% of them are in the work. So why would you not go for it? We've also got a host of organizations, particularly around construction, built environment, looking for people who've been in prison, ex-offenders. And because they know they work hard, they come with grit, but also they provide social value. And that means that's really important when they're going for big bids, big tenders. They have to say, look, we're actually making a difference with hiring people from that local area that typically left behind, etc., etc. So we're kind of trying to flip that whole narrative and make it positive. And from an employer point of view, the one thing we say is, look, don't hire people from Bridge of Hope because you feel sorry for them. That is not what you want you to do. Hire people from the Bridge of Hope careers because they're bloody great. They're just ignored by everybody else, which makes it even better. So you can get absolutely phenomenal talent while everybody else is leaving them well alone because they have a mental health condition or they may have whatever it might be. So it's flipping that whole conversation to this is a positive. This is the ultimate win-win. Not only does the employer win, but obviously you're changing people's lives, because a job is quite simply the biggest game changer in life.
The whole discussion has been very eloquently put this morning, so it has, or this afternoon. So there is still so much stigma around people who have actually been out of the workplace for a while or have a gap on their CV. And regardless of the reason, and obviously that can take its toll in the candidate, how can we build resilience and reframe our attitudes towards ourselves if we have that gap?
Well, I can say to you a couple of things. Resilience can't be taught. They do these resilience training, but we've found out that actually the data shows that you have to either have gone through the stuff or not. You know, in regards to gaps on CVs and things like this, I think that this is, again, a barrier that people are facing. You know, if I came out of work to take care of my mum because he's got dementia, for instance, and I tried to get back in, the applicant tracking system spots this as a gap and decides that you're no good. It doesn't ask you, you know, why were you absent from work? In fact, I wasn't absent from work. I continued work just as a carer. You know, the other one is refugees. You know, you have so many people, they come as refugees. Now, then they're asked to get their certificates and all sorts of things in play. By the time they get all of that stuff sorted out, they've got a gap on their CV. It's a catch-22, you know, and I think that so many more people should offer, you know, work tasters, if you like, you know, because when the bombs are dropping, the last thing on anyone's mind is, let me run upstairs and grab my master's certificate. You know, it's grab these few bits of tin food, the kids and the dog, and let's run, you know. And we really need to be more considerate of all of these things, you know, and to understand that it's your level of curiosity that must bring you to the candidate. You see a gap on a CV, find out what happened in that gap. It might have been something really quite exciting and special and adventurous, something that you'd like to bring into the workplace. We are missing out on so many candidates and so many people that take time out to care, or take time out for maternity reasons, or just take time out for mental health sake. And so we need to really beat that drum and get people to actually just employ people, to bring them in, to have those conversations, to see if there's a candidate that fits. Because if you keep excluding people because of having gaps on their CVs, they won't turn up when you put your job ad up in the future. They just won't turn up when we're struggling for candidates like we are now.
I'm not going to add much more to what Sean said, because I think he's just nailed it. But I think just to highlight, really part of our mantra is, part of it is obviously to create a platform where we can put as many people as possible who have a barrier to work into work. The other is to change organizational mindset. And it's that mindset shift that's needed, really. And that's what we spend a large amount of our time. That's why we're so thrilled to be on a podcast like this, Jordan, where, we just get this fantastic platform.
What advice would you give to people beyond job searching advice, whether that's through personal development, advice to the whole family, et cetera, et cetera?
Now, I think we've talked about quite a lot of it today, but we would, most of all, we'd say, look, embrace the difference. I'm bipolar. I'm proud to be bipolar. I don't deny that. It's my superpower. 5 years ago, 8 years ago, A, I didn't know what it was. B, then I denied it. But now I'm like, okay, well, this is what makes me different. And so if you have something that makes you different, or you've been through extremely challenging situation, whether you've been in a mental hospital, or you've been in prison, or a number of the other things we talked about, refugees, etc., etc., I would not try and hide away from that. I would lean into it and say, this is it. This is me. You talked about your own background in Northern Ireland. The fact that you came through that unscathed and done so well, as unbelievably well, is quite phenomenal. So lean in to what, I know we call it barriers to employment, but frankly, I think they're more about opportunities, and they're what make you different.
Yeah, absolutely. Like James said, with his bipolar, I know James, from 5 o'clock in the morning to about 9, 10 a.m. He's fired off about 100 emails already before everyone else. It's fantastic. He just starts the day with a boom. It's fantastic. I'm dyslexic, so I think in color, I think creatively, so I do well in biz dev and things like this. It's about understanding which direction to place your superpower. So if you know that of self, in regards to neurodiversity, for instance, when you go out to employers, you can say, actually, I'm dyslexic, alongside some greats, Richard Branson's, Orlando Bloom, Thomas Edison and the likes. So I think creatively. So this is what I can bring to the table. That's one thing. And in regards to personal development, I think for all candidates to continue on a journey of personal development and don't let that stop. Don't think I've finally arrived, I don't need to do any more. Just continue to be the best possible version of yourself. And don't just stop there. Have a look at your network, the people around you. Because every single opportunity you get in your life comes from you and your network and the systems around you. So if you diversify your network, you diversify your opportunities, and I speak to a lot of young men about this. And if you hang out with just the same type of person dressed in the same type of clothes, etc., you're going to get the same type of opportunities coming all the time. Nothing changes for you. So I meet people as if I was blind. I just want to meet your mind. I don't care your sexual orientation. I don't care what clothes you're wearing. I don't care if you're neurodivergent. I don't give a monkeys about any of that stuff. I'm just interested in your mind. And what's happened to me is my network is so diverse. It's unreal. And guess what? I get some opportunities coming at me like I never would have had growing up. I mean, from across the board, from different types of people. And that really changes everything in my world. You know, it really has made a huge difference in my life. So have a look at your network, include that in your journey on personal development, and really start to think about, why am I only hanging out with one type of person when I should be open to hanging out with people of all different ages? You know, I've got some really, really old friends. And the wisdom that comes through from them is fantastic. And guess what I get to give in return? A modern way of thinking about some things. So there's a really cool exchange that takes place, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And if we were thinking about moving on to some practical steps, gents, how would we address the gaps in our CVs, especially at the interview stage? Do we have to give details? What's the best way to skirt around that?
Yeah, so I was going to say, you know, if you could, I've spoken to some people who have taken dates out. They've just said, done this, and this, so that it can't pick up for dates, and you get that opportunity. But what I would do with the gap, this is what I'm just thinking creatively, like any dyslexic would. What I would do, I will call that gap a job. So on the CV, it will say, what did you do from this date to this date? You know, and I will say, I drop it in the slot as a job and say, I took time out to do this, and this, you know, or I had this situation in my life that I had to deal with. And so I managed that. But I'd have it sort of slotted in that sort of form among the list of jobs that I've done or I'm doing, just so that it doesn't show up as a gap in the CV. So you account for that gap, if you like, with some dates then in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Absolutely.
It does.
And I think there's a couple of other things you might want to consider. So I definitely would agree with Chance on that. I would also look to do a really powerful cover letter. And in that cover letter, address exactly that situation, saying I've done X, Y, Z, and I took 18 months off to be a care leaver, whatever it might be, so that you're addressing that straight on. And then think about other ways you can showcase your talent. Maybe you have a portfolio, particularly if you're particularly artistic and you want to go an advertising job. Well, why are you not bringing a wonderful portfolio of what you've got? Because that's going to say 1,000,000 times better or much better perspective around you than two pieces of white paper with some type on it. So yeah, you need to get creative, but kind of lean into it.
What if we keep getting rejections? No interviews. They might not say it's because of our criminal record, but we maybe have a gut feeling that it is. How can we cope with this rejection, and what steps should we take?
Well, I can tell you to go straight back to your mantra, failure cannot cope with persistence. It was taken from a book that I'd read by an author called Napoleon Hill, so definitely look it up. But it's all about your mentality. You've got to understand that you're not, it's very rare that people knock at a door and get let straight in, right? You have to keep knocking. You have to consistently knock on doors. And I'll tell you something, if you get to something like 50 interviews and you still haven't got a job, on that 51st interview, you can start to talk about serious resilience and say, look, this is my 51st interview, but I'm not giving up. I am not giving up, and to really continue to do that, because people face rejection a lot. Yeah. Now, rejection, it's going to be something that plays a part in our lives for the rest of our lives. You're going to be rejected later on down the line. You're going to be, it's a part of life. So we need to start treating rejection as if it was a family member. Look, get used to it. It'll be around for a little while. Just know that every time you experience rejection, you build resilience.
Yeah, and I think I'd just add one other thing, which is around, if you are cold calling, you're sending your CV out all the time, it's a very, very high failure rate on something like that. So why not change the game? Why not think about your own network? You will have people in your network who really believe in you. I would go to them and say, look, I keep knocking on the door. I keep getting rejected. This is what I'm looking to do. Do you know anybody I can talk to? And if they say, yes, I do, like, please, can you ask if they give me half an hour of your time? And the fact that that person, that hiring manager, has got somebody they know and trust saying, look, just give this person half an hour of their time, your odds have improved by a factor of 10x. So use your network, get creative. If you keep knocking on the door, it doesn't work, well, go through the window, go down the chimney, find a way of breaking through. But you'll find the network is the best way of the lot.
That makes sense. Thank you, James. And lastly, what if returning to work maybe feels a bit too daunting, or I'm not quite ready yet, or I want to know what maybe other additional steps that I could take? Where could someone like me get help?
Yeah, I mean, there are loads of organizations out there who will help get you job ready. So there are quite a few charities. So if you fit into a certain bucket, for want of words, we call them untapped talent pool. So let's say you're an ex-offender, let's say you're neurodiverse or homeless, previously homeless. I would go to charities that support that group. And if you need any help, we can point you in the right direction. They will then help you on that. They're all, what I found, they were really good at getting you back on your feet, really good at helping you start getting employable. What they lacked was access to the employers, which is what we give. So I go to charities, I go to social enterprises. There's tons of boot camps out there. So there's loads of skills, etc. Or alternatively, and Chance mentioned, you might want to look at a work placement and get an internship, just so you dip your toe rather than having to throw everything at it. So there are gradual steps there rather than having to take the big leap if that's a little bit too much.
Yeah, and that's perfect. And I think that's important for people to know as well, James, especially if, there is platforms and bodies that can help. But sometimes people just aren't ready to take the steps, and they maybe want to have a little bit of an insight in what the other side looks like or what's in front of them. So I think what you do is really important. And that's the end of today's episode. I just want to say a big thank you to Chance and James. If you're looking for a new role, why not check out Brook Street Recruitment for the latest job postings? There may be a dream role on there for you. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends. And remember, follow People First on all your favourite podcast platforms. See you next time.